as I was about to pursue a path, like out of frustration, a couple of times I was very glad that I didn't, because when I did my own little investigation into it, I found a very explainable reason for it. And or I found out that it just flat out wasn't true.
Yes.
And I would have gone and had this interaction with someone that would have been confrontational. And unfortunately, in the end, I would have lost credibility.
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
Hey, this is Ashley, and today we are celebrating a big milestone. This is our 30th, yep, that's right, 30 episode. I recently read a statistics from Forbes that said only 26% of podcast shows have over 10 episodes, and they've also published a new episode within the last year. So, cheers to beating that statistic and being in the top 25% of podcast shows. In case you missed the last episode of Forensics Unfiltered, over the next several episodes, we're giving you an exclusive peek into the 2023 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. Normally, you'd need to snag the All Access Pass, which is priced at $197, to hear all of the replays of past interviews and presentations. There's 28 in total. But we are getting so pumped for the 2024 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit that we're sharing 6 interviews from last year's summit with you for free. And guess what? If you don't want to miss out on the free tickets to this year's summit, make sure to sign up for the VIP waitlist. You will be the first to know when tickets become available this year. But that's not all. If you want access to past virtual summits, a whole library of webinars, and exclusive e-courses, you need to join our membership, The Vault. You can get started for just $29 a month, and it's your all-access pass to everything you need to stay ahead in the forensic field. Now, let's jump into today's episode, Bridging Communication Gaps in Blended Teams, Sworn and Civilian, with Josh Mott. Josh's forensic unit has been transitioning from all sworn members to eventually all civilian members, and he's here to share his insights on how to improve communication between sworn officers and civilian staff. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Before we start this episode, our guests would like to share a disclaimer that the opinions shared are their own and not representative of their current or past employment. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. We're so excited to have you back here today. Today I have with me Josh Mott, and we're going to get into a little bit of details about his background in just a minute. But we're really excited to have a conversation with Josh because, as many of you have, Josh has a blended unit. So he has a unit of both civilian and sworn CSIs and examiners, and many of you guys have that as well, and some of the challenges that arise from that. So we're going to chat with Josh today about how he has navigated that as a supervisor. So before we dive into the topic at hand, Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of what you're doing now.
Morning, ma'am. Thank you. Fair to say I'm still navigating that. Too. So I'm coming from being I'm in my 20th year with Sheriff's Office. 19 years of that has been sworn as a deputy and then as a detective. The vast majority of that, though, spent specifically as a crime scene detective. I, approximately a year ago, a little over a year ago, transitioned into a civilian position, though, as the manager over the crime scene unit and the latent print unit. That coincided, as it usually does, with some retirements and personnel movement, and it was also the time at which we could begin this transition from sworn to civilian crime scene. And so transitioning the supervisory role to a civilian was the first step in that. I, having been there all this time and gained the experience as a sworn member, I also kind of saw the need and pursued my higher education leading up to that. And so to this point, I've completed a bachelor's at UCF in criminal justice and then also the master's program at UF in forensic medicine. And I also, on the crime scene certification side, have attained the senior crime scene analyst certification through IAI and have maintained that now for one renewal cycle so far. The bulk of my work, around 13 years spent as a crime scene investigator, and then for the past several years being the senior crime scene investigator there. I've trained a lot of our folks and have been there for a lot of growth. And I think, as we're going to continue to talk about in a minute, there's a lot more growth ahead.
Awesome. And so what's the position that you hold now, and who do you oversee as part of that position?
So I'm the forensic services manager, and I have the latent print unit with its examiners that are, it's latent examiners, and then also one fingerprint technician who serves to act for criminal registration at our office, and also for civilian fingerprinting of various cash transactions that she has to take care of for that. And then on the crime scene side, we have 4 sworn detectives, have a part-time deputy who works the road that is still serving on the crime scene unit, and have since, as we're sitting here, I've hired 3 civilian crime scene investigators. I have 5 more that are in the pipe that are going through background. We're eventually going to have a team of 8 civilian crime scene people, and that will be our full team, our full complement.
That's very exciting. Very large team. So you previously had your forensic unit was entirely sworn, and recently you have made the transition to starting to bring in some civilians into that unit. And so now you're supervising a unit where you have some sworn individuals and some individuals that are civilian. And how has that transition gone for you and your agency as far as bringing in those civilians? And have you found that, they're having any communication struggles or differences with each other working in the same unit and doing the same job?
Right. Again, so we're transitioning to fully civilian. We're just in the middle of it. So the goal isn't to have a mixed unit. I think that's notable. I do know of a few departments where it's just built in for whatever reasons that their long-term plan is to have some civilian, some sworn. We're looking to do this to kind of get up to the industry standard. I think if you look around the nation, you'll see it is more likely to find a civilian crime scene unit. I think it is in keeping with some of the jury expectations now of having folks who are educated on a specific science. They seek out certifications, and they come in almost to offer a somewhat detached perspective in law enforcement. Like they're members of law enforcement. They offer a bit of a separation from the cops that are doing the work. And so that's a bit of the motivation, but also we are, as an agency, looking for or we are pursuing a lot of growth in a lot of areas, but in specifically the forensics area, we're looking to add things that are very technology based, very science driven, things like rapid DNA. We're trying to get into, or we're in the middle of acquiring brass tracks so that we can be a portal into NIBIN. We're already using the Faro laser scanner platform. And so all of these things are areas that really require someone to focus on that work and be highly educated in that work. And so, coming from being sworn for 19 years, I think I have the luxury that I can probably beat us up a little bit and say that most of the cops aren't really looking to get into all that. And so I can say from experience of having trained many folks that as we always hired from within when it was deputies, we saw a lot of turnover. And sometimes The reason being that it was crime scene offered a really good stepping stone in the career path, because it would get them in the door to investigative services. It would have them involved in those kind of call outs, and they'd learn a lot that way. And so then they could transition into being a detective. And that's worked great for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Of course, that's great for the individual. It's kind of tough for the unit, though.
For sure. I think a lot of agencies
And
have
so
that
it's-
difficulty when they have sworn individuals because they move so frequently. And to
Right,
get
there's-
really
there's
proficient,
a lot
you
of
got to
different-
be there for a minute.
For sure. There's a lot of different areas that a sworn member can explore.
Mhm.
There's just a whole list, and it's not really what we're here to talk about. But so the hope is to transition to folks that are really invested in doing that work and can become masters of it and bring that mastery to a courtroom, of course, as that's always the end goal for anything we're doing in forensics, because that's what the word means. So that's where we're at. We're trying to transition to have that team full.
So you were talking about how you guys are making the transition from sworn to civilian for a variety of different reasons. But as it stands right now you have a unit of mixed staff. So you have sworn individuals that have been there for a while, I imagine. And then you're bringing in new civilians, and they're all working together in that one environment. So something I've kind of observed over my years, I worked in a military laboratory, in a military environment for many years, where we had a mix of like military personnel and civilians. And even the environment that I work in now, where we have a mix of sworn and civilians. I think that there is, just from my viewpoint, this dichotomy that exists about how you can communicate with civilians versus sworn. And I do think that I've observed that it does seem like supervisors can be more direct and blunt with their orders and requirements of sworn employees, where we have to be a little more, like, we can't be so forceful with civilians in our communication styles. It does seem like there's a difference between communicating with sworn and civilian. Have you found any of that kind of thing to be true in your unit now as it is?
I could certainly agree that an off the cuff answer is, yeah, there are differences in how you can address them. Personally, I can recall, even going back to patrol, the way that a patrol officer interacts with his fellow patrol officers is pretty blunt, pretty direct, because sometimes the situations dictate that. Also, the chain of command is pretty clearly established when it comes to the sworn side, and you're very accustomed to adhering to it. There's direct consequences when you don't. And so that's something that sworn people kind of just take as fundamental, and it's not really much of a challenge. And the flip side of that then is generally when you just directly tell them to do something, then you can kind of count on that being carried out. That being said, I do notice, as I'm getting a little older, I notice that there's a whole generation of working adults that are in this working community right now that are a substantial generation change from myself. And I think we've seen a lot change societally as to what is accepted, what is not, what's normal, what's not, what are the ways in which we all interact with each other, and what is not. And I see that even in some of the younger sworn, because now of having been here for 20 years, there's deputies that are very young, and so they grew up in a very different generation. So what it leads me to realize is it really comes down to being an individual. Your concerns really kind of have to center on the individual. There are some generalizations you can apply, certainly, but especially in a unit or these units that I'm supervising, the size of them is small enough that you have that familiarity with everybody. Mm-hmm. It's not as if this is working in an Amazon storage packing plant or whatever, and there's 1,000 employees. I have units of about a dozen people or so, and I know all their names, I know their backgrounds, and I know probably most of their kids' names and such. I don't know all their birthdays, but I'm not going to try.
You're working on it.
Right. So by default, I kind of soak up some of that knowledge. And so because of that, I also, it's kind of a forced individual situation, but I think it's a good thing, because then you learn the subtle differences in the individual. And because there's plenty of sworn people that you can, cuss them right in the face and tell them you're screwing up, get in line, do this. and they will, and you move on, and you never hear anything about it. That doesn't mean there's not a sworn person who's also going to really get their feelings hurt by that and create some whole other barrier. And on the flip side, there are plenty of civilians that can take it just like it is, and can be blunt. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's no difference between the two, but I'm saying what I'm finding is I think there's less and less when it comes to supervising them. I think it's less and less should it be the focus of this is a sworn person and this is a civilian. I'm focusing. I think it should be more about the individual.
Yeah, I love that. And something else that you said that I think comes up a lot is the generational thing. So when we teach our classes, we talk about generations in the workplace, and we hear a lot of people that struggle with different generations. And one of the things we talk about in class is that it really comes down to people. It isn't necessarily like, yes, there are some commonalities between generations. There's some commonalities between sworn and civilian and all of that. But as a supervisor, guys, if you're listening right now, it literally comes down to learning your people and communicating in their style. And that is, I think, how you can make the most impact on your unit.
In getting to know the individuals, it becomes readily apparent that some people are just naturally positive about change and growth and a little uncertainty, and other people are definitively negative about it. Trying to nurture up the positives is something that I work on. Trying to create and develop and plant the seed of positivity in some of the others is something else I work on. It's a challenge. There are some people that by the time you're working with seasoned adults, they've spent their whole adult life being this way. You're not going to change them overnight, but you can lead by example.
Yeah.
And you can find the positives about whatever the scenario is and focus on those. But in the end, some people take that and are positive, others are not. Again, that's not a civilian or sworn thing. That's an individual
Yeah.
thing.
And this is another tangent, like unrelated to this particular conversation, but related to what you just said. A lot of supervisors spend a lot of time and invest a lot of energy into trying to get their lowest performers like up to the same standard as everybody else. So in everybody's unit, you're going to have like 3 levels of performance. You're going to have top performers. You're going to have a small amount of people in the top performance area. Most of your people are going to be in the middle. And then you're going to have a few kind of low performers and probably like bad attitudes and stuff could be on that low performance end. And most supervisors invest a lot of time on that low performance end, trying to get them up to the same par as everybody else, instead of really investing and pouring into your top, like your middle and top performers. So like what Josh was just saying there is like really building up your positive people and pouring into them, because they're the ones that are driving the unit forward, is a great investment of your time as a supervisor, I think.
And I'm certainly guilty of that as well. I have a tendency to expect a lot of people because I expect a lot of myself. The hours I put in, the attention I give work while I'm there. So it's a struggle for me sometimes when they don't seem to have that same work ethic. And I've had enough supervisors and higher supervisors above me now that can help me remember that very concept of kind of having folks that are average in the middle, some that stand out for good reasons, some that stand out for bad. You have to just kind of take them as a group that gets the group project done. As an aside, though, one of the issues that can arise from that is the perception by the high performers that not everyone's pulling their weight.
For sure.
So that's, there's got to be boundaries to it. There's got to be a minimum standards that they have to meet, of course.
For sure. I totally agree. So during this transitional process where you were bringing in some additional civilians into the sworn unit that was already present, is there anything you've learned during this process or any tips that you would give to other supervisors that are considering either including civilian and sworn together or kind of making this transition between their units?
We're taking a quick break to shout out our amazing sponsor, Justice Tracks by Versaterm. They've been our top sponsor of the Forensic Supervisor Success Summit for the past 2 years, making it possible to deliver all of this fantastic content to you for free. Justice Tracks by Versaterm has been providing top-notch laboratory information management solutions to forensic laboratories since 1995. Based in sunny Mesa, Arizona, they serve some of the most sophisticated law enforcement agencies and crime laboratories across the globe, from North America and South America to Europe, Australia, and even the Middle East. All of their software solutions, this includes LIMS Plus, LIMS Plus DNA, LIMS Plus Portal, Chain Links, and more, are designed by experienced forensic scientists and built by top-notch computer engineers. With nearly 200 forensic operations using their software on 6 continents, you know you're in good hands. And here's something cool. Justice Tracks is constantly enhancing their applications with feedback from thousands of criminalists who use them daily. Plus, as a Microsoft certified partner, they use their latest technologies to develop applications that make a real difference. So, a big thank you to Justice Tracks by Versaterm for their support. If you're looking for a trusted partner in forensic software solutions, check out Justice Tracks. They're making a world of difference in the forensic community. Now, let's get back to our episode.
Is there anything you've learned during this process or any tips that you would give to other supervisors that are considering either including civilian and sworn together or kind of making this transition between their units?
So if you're going to ask me about some tips and tricks for the transition time, thankfully on my end, because it is a transition time, it's not a long-term goal of having this mixed personnel. Then, the unit still has a mission to accomplish while we're training up people from no experience. So, the old guards kind of have to keep the ship afloat and serve as the backbone. That's a job that's not terribly challenging to them because they've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So you just got to make sure that they keep their head in the game and they know that they still have a job to do. They want a paycheck, and to keep that mission alive. What has helped a bit, because we have in a crime scene unit, there's a lot of kind of little separate missions that have to be done on a daily basis, at least the way we do it, because of the interest that we put in the value of firearms that are seized from the agency and the role we serve in evaluating those cases and processing them, as well as call-outs. I think it's useful to find those tasks that are best suited for individuals, so you have one less thing to stress about. If you have someone where in an ordinary career growth path as a supervisor, you're trying to grow up everybody to make them well-rounded individuals, and you're trying to expose them to all the different things. I feel like this time isn't really the best time to do that because you're trying to grow up these trainees from nothing, absolutely nothing. And so if you have the luxury of having a group of people that can get all of the job done, but for sure that, this guy likes to do this task and this gal likes to do this task, and that kind of keeps them happy to keep the mission alive, well, then I think that's smart to just set them on that path and ease the burden of yourself so that you can keep the mission alive.
Yeah. I think something you also said is really key to know during this transitional time is that it's temporary. It's temporary, right? So it may be hard for a little while, but you will come to the end of that period of time and the transition will be over, and everything will be as the way that you were working towards it to be. And
depending on the member, speaking to the sworn side, if you're transitioning to where you're transitioning to civilians. So if you have a group of sworn that has the capacity, the interest, and the time in that they can then pursue a multitude of other paths within the agency, and the agency is one that has those paths, I suspect it probably is because an agency that has a dedicated crime scene unit is usually going to be an agency that also has several other specialized units. Yeah. And if it's an agency that is taking this step to transition into that kind of growth for the crime scene unit, then it probably has other units as well. There's so many different things besides patrol, in that there's general investigations, there's canine, there's narcotics, There's the traffic unit. There's, perhaps a marine unit or any list of things. And so, probably your people. And if you're the supervisor, probably some of the channels and avenues in your agency that you can perhaps advocate for those employees that have put their time in the crime scene unit and are needing and looking for the next hat they're going to wear for the next period of time in their career.
So during this transitional process, what lessons have you learned while you guys were going through this or are going through this?
Right. Well, so this may sound funny. I've actually learned that it's often best to not answer someone immediately. I've really had to force myself to do this. I think that we're all pretty accustomed to being pretty plugged in, and we're accustomed to being instantly communicative. There's abundant methods at which we all communicate with each other now, formally and informally, text messaging and emails, even maybe a phone call, but usually not. I think it's usually some kind of a social media app or a text or whatnot. And, thanks to technology, we carry these things around with us and they're always there. And so I think a lot of us feel a need to, you hear an email ding, you got to check it because you need to see, is that something that that is, immediately actionable or needs to be. And sure, there's plenty of those that exist as a supervisor, depending on what you're responsible for. I'm sure that you have to be on the hook for some of those things. But I think it makes a habit within ourselves to just always feel the need to answer immediately. And partly, I mean, depending on the time of day, depending on the urgency, I think it's good to unplug. But that's not really what I'm speaking to at the moment. What I'm meaning is, as a supervisor, especially if you're in the situation of the navigating of this process of the different personnel and kind of all the different issues that come up at all different times of the day, I think that if you force yourself to have a pause to some of the things that are being asked of you, then it's helpful. Now, on the one hand, you may just need that pause to evaluate what you're going to say. Maybe this is something where you're talking to an individual and they have some kind of an issue, either with another employee or with you, and it's almost ready to become an argument. And so it's natural to just say, I'm going to give you my answer right now. I have found that if you intentionally don't answer that and offer yourself a moment to reflect and reread and backspace, that can be helpful. And on another note completely, but on the same topic, there's some employees I feel that need to be pushed to be problem solvers. And if you are the kind of supervisor that is ready to just enable answering any and all of their questions all the time, when perhaps it's a question that you have already answered in some kind of structured fashion before, and they just didn't retain it and they just haven't practiced it, but you've given them that tool to answer this question before, then intentionally not answering them for a period of time may result in pushing them to find an answer on their own. And I think that's good for everybody in the long run.
I 100% agree with both of those. By the way, when I was very young in my career, I was very much like that. I always checked my emails. I was checking it outside of work hours, and it can become very consuming and you never detach from the job. You're just working all the time, and that's very stressful. You don't even realize like the stress that puts on you to constantly be plugged into all the things going on. And obviously as forensic supervisors, we can't completely detach. We do have to, respond to calls, respond to, whatever is important. But as far as my emails go, I have definitely gotten to the point in my career where I will check them like once or twice throughout the day, but I no longer feel this urgency to get to them or respond to them quickly because I have so many other things that I have to do. And I have learned that if it's really important, if it's really vital, they're going to call me anyways. So people are not sending like dire, urgent things via email. And if they are, and you don't answer it, they call you anyway. So I love that as a lesson for all supervisors out there is like, I have sent emails to people who have responded at like midnight, 1 a.m, like just let it be. You can look at it tomorrow.
I think everybody that's probably listening to this, or most of us anyway, are used to being on call.
Yes.
and have been on call probably for quite a long time if you're a supervisor over that kind of unit. And there's no getting away from that. That's a fundamental part of it. And so I think those areas that you just mentioned where we can intentionally leave it be, I think we should all make a strong effort to do that. And I'm speaking to myself just as much, which is what I think has helped me kind of realize as I've prepared to try to share some information with other supervisors. I've realized something that taxes me, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Sure. And then, like I said, on the flip side, also, it helps to kind of think about what you're going to say before you say it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that too. I think that we sometimes respond too quickly. Oftentimes, I can feel like annoyed or irritated by something that I've been asked. And I have absolutely learned over the years to just put a pause on it, come back to it later. And I also think what you said is very vital for supervisors too, because it's a lot easier for us to just give them the answer, give them the answer, give them the answer. It's faster for us to just, when they come and ask us something, to just tell them what the answer is, but you will always be their crutch. And we have heard so many supervisors be like, I don't know, they keep asking me the same thing 800 times, and they're not getting it themselves. And it's eating up a lot of my time during the day. And, your staff are capable of problem solving and thinking through things themselves. If they've been trained, if they have SOPs that they can follow, they can find the answers that they need in their coworkers, in the policies, like whatever. So if they're coming to you constantly for reassurance about what they're doing, letting them work through that problem solving on their own is going to help build their confidence, and then also save a lot of time on your end having to field all of those questions, for sure.
Also, as I've been growing as a supervisor, I can recall some instances where I can't really take credit to say that I so intentionally paused like I'm speaking to now, but what other circumstances, maybe the phone did ring or something and it sidetracked me at the moment. As I was about to pursue a path, like out of frustration, because someone had, I discovered an error for a repeated error, let's say, something like that. And I was ready to just kind of go on a warpath of frustration of, like, why aren't you doing this right? Why can't you listen or whatever? And a couple of times I was very glad that I didn't, because when I did my own little investigation into it, I found a very explainable reason for it. And or I found out that it just flat out wasn't true.
Yes.
And I would have gone and had this interaction with someone that would have been, negative. It would have been confrontational. And unfortunately, in the end, I would have lost credibility because I would have been wrong. And so I really count my blessings those times when something paused me and then on reflection taught me I probably need to force myself to pause when this is the kind of thing at stake.
Those are great lessons.
It's easy, I think. I think it's easy as a peer, when you're in a peer-to-peer situation, I think it's easy, you guys can argue back and forth, you can shout and scream, you can do whatever, but at the end, you're just peers. When you're the supervisor, everything you say, of course, carries more weight, but your word is your credibility, and it's kind of your bond when it comes to the example you're setting and the direction you're giving. So you got to be right.
Yes.
So that forced pause really has helped me be
yes.
right. And there are times that I just know internally, and I just kind of go, "Whew, boy, I'm glad I didn't say that. Glad I went and looked at that first, and nobody else knows about it. I mean, now you all do, but you don't know the particulars, so it's fine.
You must always investigate the truth.
Right.
That's a
knee-jerk reactions are bad. Knee-jerk reactions are very bad.
You got to remember, this is like, we're totally tangenting now, but this is such good information. Like, as a supervisor, you must always remember that when someone comes to you and tells you something, they will always shine themselves in the best light. So when someone comes to you and they vent to you about something, or they complain about something, or some experience they had, or something that happened on a crime scene, or whatever, it's very easy to get worked up about something that you've been told. It's happened to me many times where someone will come back from a crime scene and be like, I was out there and the deputy said this to me, or the detective did this, or whatever. And I'm amped up. I'm in the office. I'm like ready to fight, And I've learned that lesson, that you must always investigate the truth. You must always get the other side of the story, because People will always shine themselves in the best light, and you will save yourself so much conflict by just remaining calm, putting the pause on it, like Josh said, and actually going and getting all of the details. And then when you know all of the details and everything that occurred, then you can properly address that, minimize any conflict that happened, and really get to the bottom of things. So, but that was a hard lesson learned over many years of supervision, was not instantly reacting as soon as somebody came to me. I learned that people don't always tell you all the facts.
It's a good lesson for life, too.
For sure.
In all our relationships. Knee-jerk reactions are rarely positive.
Yes, for sure. So, as a leader of your team, what communication skills have you learned that you could share with other supervisors that would benefit them with communicating with their own teams?
Sure. So I think I would probably reiterate a bit from earlier, as with a lot of the conflicts out there. If we can force ourselves to avoid generalizations and avoid preconceived notions, I think we're setting ourselves up for greater success. And then if you are able to do that and remove yourself from those preconceived notions, let that individual show their true self to you, show you their intentions, and then focus more on the goal rather than those distractions. You have to, I think, come to this arena with a tirelessly positive hope that they're going to do the same. And you can help you can serve your part by, of course, setting that example, as hard as it is, but that's the job, isn't it? You got to keep that up as long as you're capable, and then a little more, because you always have a little more. In the end, if you've done all that and you have been as conscious and intentional about that, then in the end, you'll have known that you've done your part, right? Other things, it may seem simple, but I find it a great reminder, is that not every snarky comment needs a retort. What ground is really gained? I know it sounds simple, but really, what ground?
It's another great life lesson.
It revisits a little bit of what we did just say about, you are the supervisor, so you have to set the example, and the comments you make can carry a bit more weight. Not in just that you're the supervisor, but because you are the supervisor, those comments reflect greater, and you're expected more to take the high road. And that's, I think, if you're the kind of person that naturally can take the high road and not get drawn into those conflicts, I think you're better off. If you're the kind of person that can read a thread on Facebook that someone asks the most benign question about something, and then so many people just jump on them with the most ridiculous amounts of negativity or self-perpetuated knowledge and foisting their expert opinion on something, just their attitudes really come out. If you're the kind of person that naturally just moves on to the next thing, I think you're doing better. Versus if you're the one that has to argue that to someone that doesn't even matter, you might want to work on that. You might want to look on that. In the land of conflicts, like I said, take the high road. Because the other thing is, everyone's walking their own path, and they're carrying their own rocks. If we can force ourselves to soften our assumptions about things and about those around you, I think it helps us.
Love that. All right. So before we check out of this chat for today, is there anything else you'd like to plug before we depart?
Sure. I would sum it up with the header being self-care, some kind of a wellness of self-care. As I am in my 20th year, I'm fortunate and blessed that I was hired when FRS Special Risk was 25 years here in Florida, for those in Florida. And so looking at 5 years left for the rest of my pension, and being over 40 and all, and feeling, that I'm not 20 years old, I've been trying to take a harder look at self-care. And we touched on some of those things earlier, like you give your 40 hours a week to the job, and I'm sure everyone already gives a little more than 40. So try not to go out of your way to go and give them even more, and I'm not saying that you're not a loyal employee and you're not goal-oriented. I'm sure, I hope you are, or you wouldn't be in the role you're in. But enough is enough. And if it's not something that needs addressed right now, then let it be. And on the personal side, I would try to be another voice to anyone that's kind of they've had a nagging voice in their mind, whether it's their doctor or whether it's themselves, but, take a look at what you eat. Find half an hour in a day to just go for a walk, ride a bike, do something. whatever you do, don't let your years on the job outnumber your years in retirement.
Ooh,
That's
a good quote.
That is my hope.
I love it. Live that life, guys. Don't let your years at the job outlive your years in retirement. That's a good one. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Josh. We hope you guys really enjoyed this conversation and that you guys enjoy the rest of the Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. And we will see you at the next presentation.
And that's a wrap for our 30th episode. You can help us celebrate this big milestone by rating this podcast, or even better, leave us a review. Remember, we will be announcing when you can catch more interviews and presentations just like this to our VIP waitlist. So click the link below, sign up for the VIP waitlist. You will be the first to know when free tickets to the 2024 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit become available. And if you want continued access to this interview, along with over 20 more interviews and presentations, definitely grab the All Access Pass to the 2023 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. But honestly, the best deal is joining our membership, The Vault. For just $29 a month, you get access to past virtual summits, a library full of webinars, and featured e-courses. It truly is the ultimate resource for forensic professionals. As always, thanks so much for listening to Forensics Unfiltered with Gap Science. Don't forget to tune in next week for another exciting episode in this series, Building Stronger Teams Through Effective One-on-One Meetings with Steve Gardner. We'll see you then. Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website. Head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.